What's up, guys? This is Jay and Scott with Revolution Radio. So instead of doing like a show where we have 4 or 5 different topics, we decided just to hop on. Wow, this was pretty relevant right now, and discuss what I lovingly call in my file saves as cops being dicks. Now, the interesting thing I just want to point out is ever since I've started doing not just this show, but radio in general, I always have to pull out like source media, and so I have to save pictures. It's kind of like taking a picture in time for every incident that happens, right? When I type up cops, there is just a laundry list of stuff. I have to keep changing the names because of how many times things happen in each state, and then I have to start putting years on it as well. Like, we have so much stuff too that, or at least I do, that's documented that we haven't even get a chance to talk about. It happens so quick it doesn't, kind of rise to the top as being something that's relevant to discuss, and so it just gets forgotten, but still stays in my like little file there. And yeah, so 2021, my file source is cops being dicks 21, and we've already got Virginia and Minnesota as things to discuss. And we want to talk about starting off the situation that happened in Virginia where Lieutenant Karan Nazario was pulled over. And this did happen in 2020, I believe, but it's become relevant recently here. Anyway, the incident happened at night when Nazario was driving a new vehicle. He had purchased it within 2 weeks of the incident. And police officers pulled him over because they said that they could not see his license plate. Now,
Yeah, or
further
his dealer tags, right?
Right, and on further inspection of that video, they actually could see the dealer tags hanging in his back window. But anyway, in that situation, Nazario drove he said about 2 minutes to make sure that he was going to a well-lit area. And I want to, just think about this. He's a lieutenant, a second lieutenant in our military. He wanted to make sure he was in a well-lit area when he was being pulled over by the cops. So almost immediately in this confrontation, cops pull out guns and start yelling at him, asking him how many people are in the car, asking him to get out of the car, yelling at him. One telling him, "You're about to ride the lightning, son." And by the way, the guy looked younger than him. Um, I'm annoyed when people call other people son when they're around the same age. It's fucking annoying and degrading. All of this going on, and Nazario saying, "What is this about? Why are you pulling me over? What's the problem?" Cops not giving any real answers, and they said, "You need to get out of the car," and he said, "No," and he actually, on one of the videos, you can hear him say, "I'm afraid to get out of the car." And again, think about that. A second lieutenant in our military who's fought overseas, said to deal with terrorists, the worst of the worst, I'm sure, and he's afraid of our cops, and rightfully so. And the officer that you see the most, Joel Gutierrez, I believe is his name, Joe Gutierrez. He actually tells him, "Well, you should be afraid," and
Yeah.
um, then goes to pepper spray him. All of
This
the
whole time, by the way, he has his hands up.
Yes, yeah, his hands out the window, hands up. He's doing
And,
exactly
and,
what he
and
should
when
do.
they sprayed him, they had opened his door. He had turned his body, but his seatbelt was restricting him. And he says, I'm afraid to take, he doesn't want to take off his seatbelt because, as we all know, if you motion your hand in a direction, that could be you motioning towards a magical weapon
Hmm.
that should be hidden somewhere in the cop's imagination.
And in
And
fact,
so,
the image that we have up for this is exactly that. In fact, you can see the seatbelt restraining him as his hands are up and his face is pepper sprayed. So we, yeah, we actually have that magical moment there. Um, Essentially, paramedics came to help Nazario, and the cops let him go. Like it was no big deal because, well, they weren't really stopping him on anything. Now, the reason why this is relevant now is because after inspection of the video and a lawsuit by Nazario to the Virginia police, um, Joe Gutierrez has been fired, and Nazario actually has another lawsuit that he is. I don't know
Yeah,
if he
civil suit.
served in. Yeah, I don't. Yeah, and I don't know where it's at judicially speaking, but I do know that it's either getting ready to be served or if it's still in processing. I'm not sure, but essentially just to make sure this doesn't happen again. And yeah,
Good luck.
I know, right? I'll just briefly say though, like, I think anyone watching this video is like at a point where you're like just disgusted by these assholes. Like this dude serves in our military. Like there's no uh,
There's no respect by the police officers even given to other people who have actually protected our freedoms. They are not on the equal. If
right.
you're
Well,
not a
and I was just
blue,
yeah.
yeah,
No, and I was just gonna say, and there's no like confusing him for not being a member of our military. Not to mention the fact that there was absolutely no reason to escalate it that quickly. And these cops are not supposed to do that. That is
they're
when these
trained to
bad
just
situations.
de-escalate. Right.
Exactly, exactly. And they have no reason to start off the confrontation with guns drawn and yelling at him. There was nothing. In fact, again, the reason they pulled him over is they couldn't see the license plate. That's it. They
Well,
said he was
I'll give you
eluding
one thing though.
police, but
The fact that he drove a little further gives them the mindset of now we can do what we want because he's already pushed the boundaries. And I completely agree with him about a well-lit area. I mean, I understand that very much so. And you're more likely to have surveillance at a well-lit area, not just from the cop's body cam, which, by the way, still to this day sometimes disappears and becomes edited, or we didn't turn the audio on, or et cetera, et cetera.
right. But then again, and you're right. To think though that that's a place you need to be. And by the way, it's really smart of him to do that. I wouldn't have thought of doing it myself. Um, but again, he's military. You would think that being comfortable in that uniform, serving as he did, his thought process would be, oh, I'm just going to talk to these guys real quick, tell them what's going on. It's me, no big deal. We're fine. But the fact that, and I hate to say this, the fact that he's a little bit darker hue, he knows they're going to fuck with me. And that's what happened. I know, it's disgusting to see the actions
Well,
that these
and
these
even though
officers are
I would
taking.
I would say he's definitely darker. You got to remember too, these are Hispanic cops. So I mean,
The
it's like,
second one, he's a white boy.
yeah, the other ones are what, but I mean, I still to this day, to me, behavior was sure there's some discrimination that goes on with cops with profiling, have no doubt, but I'm just as terrified as anyone else by the sheer dishonesty and the aggression and the hatred that all of these police officers seem to have for and disdain for the general public. It is
Agreed.
it's put on display every single time that they do this. Did this guy pull over like it was a textbook deal? No, he drove a little further to a place. Was he given the benefit that he actually was wearing an active duty? And he could have presented. Did they ask him if he had a weapon? They didn't. They didn't do all the things that would have, let's say, verified that they were in fear for their lives. In other words, you say, do you have a weapon on you? Are you carrying? They didn't ask any of those questions. So that right there invalidates their supposed, I'm afraid for my life as a cop. If you were afraid for your life as a cop, you definitely don't want to escalate the situation right off the bat before you say have disarmed somebody or before you know what I mean?
Right.
So
No.
this is an outward aggression that the cop is directing at him for no reason. He's not afraid for his life. He's pissed off. He's pissed off that you didn't get under his boot and do exactly what his procedure manual says that you're supposed to do.
Well,
And
when you
that's
actually
enough.
And when you watch the video too, it's like he really comes off as a guy who, and again, uh, this is my interpretation of it. And I'm pro. Who knows? None of it is on record because none of it has been said. But watching him, at first, you can tell that they think, oh, here comes there's some dangerous, you know, punk kid, potentially, I'm not gonna say there was, a racial slur, thrown in there. Not, I don't know, but I can tell like that's where they were directed, like with this kind of just disrespect for this individual. Then they pull him over. They actually see him, and then it's almost like they're pissed off because he outranks them. He's more of a
Yeah,
hero
or
than they
pissed
are,
off because that's not what they expected.
or that,
And
yes.
that
But I
definitely
think
happens. I
I
agree.
think that whole thing of like realizing, oh, this is an actual hero. And old fat boy Gutierrez over there, he wanted to be military. He wanted to actually be a hero, but he's a loser. He's a pussy loser who's a coward and couldn't actually serve. So he's got to use his cop dick and be a complete asshole in that situation. I really feel like that's what. Maybe I'm wrong. I don't know, but he escalates things so quickly, and before Nazario can really even react, he's yelling out command after command after command. And yeah, like you said, it's we know what procedures are supposed to be done. We know that they're supposed to de-escalate a situation. This guy did the exact opposite. And weren't you telling? I don't know if it was on the record. It was kind of interesting. We were talking about this, so I don't know if this was on one of our last shows or not. But didn't you gave an interesting statistic about how like 80% of cops come from like abusive homes?
Now, yeah, I will say that this is CNN, but this actually statistic is pretty old. And but I'm not going to say it's changed. I'm going to say it's probably still around the same. This was probably over 8 years ago, and I bet I don't know how much data is out there for this at that time, but CNN was doing a story on some cops that said over 80% of police officers come from alcoholic and abusive homes. Their original households had somebody in them who was abusive or alcoholic. And there's no confusion on the propensity for people to become, almost psychopathic when they have. Now that's the psychopathy is pretty much genetic, but the behavioral traits that can make someone just about psychopathic, like, oh, there's a puppy, it's going to bite me, shoot it. Who would do that? Well, we know who does that. So those kind of traits can be born out of abusive and alcoholic homes. It doesn't mean it always happens. Many of us are the victims and survivors of that kind of abuse, but it's funny how it seems that there's an overall propensity for those kind of people who are harboring some deep emotional issues tend to become police officers. They only need 6 months worth of training, and it takes only 1/3 of the time it takes to be a hairstylist. So let's do it, and that way somebody will give me a gun, a tin badge, and they have to bow.
Yeah, but
And that's
what's more important? Uneven bangs or shooting innocent people in the streets? Come on, like,
right,
you know.
right. And the other one, you have a giant police union protecting you from any kind of vile thing that you want to do to anybody at any time.
Oh, that's
So I
important.
mean,
Cool.
haircut stylists, if they were stabbing people in the face all the time, they would need a union like that. But unfortunately, they don't.
Uh,
Um,
well, in this one, I have to say, like, as you know, disturbing as the video is, and I think when you watch it, you kind of put yourself in that position, and that would be a pretty horrific scenario. Um, but this one kind of had more of a happy ending. Um, out of all of, out of the most recent police videos that we've seen, and the next one, was a police officer, 19-year veteran, and she killed a 20-year-old kid, uh, Dante Wright. That was just happened last night. Um,
and of all places, Minneapolis.
yeah, I think it was like a few blocks away from where George Floyd was killed.
They've had to fill Minneapolis's ranks as fast as they possibly could. They disassembled the police force there after this last summer, and then of course what do? They pass bills to basically rebuild it. And so anytime you do that, you're going to have an influx of tons of officers. I guarantee they're not the ones that were there before. And so where do they look first? And if you people aren't familiar with this term, there's a term called gypsy cops. And what that means is cops who get in trouble at one department resign before they get in any kind of disciplinary or prosecution thing. And they're free from that. They take their pensions and they go somewhere else. It's almost like they start with a new record, because they don't even share records of disciplinary action a lot of times between. It's not like your medical records. They don't just transfer. You'd have to go find where the cop works before to see his disciplinary record there. So
And a
they
lot of
almost
times
get to
police
start fresh
unions
and
cover
new.
that up for them too.
Yeah.
It's a lot like the Catholic Church and priests. And I'm not even joking. It's how
No,
that
no,
works
it
too.
is.
Uh,
But my point is, I don't know if that woman had been on that Minneapolis police force for 19 years. She could be a 19-year veteran and at the same time not be from that police force. But it's also been pretty apparent. And I know a lot of you watch tons of YouTube videos, and you can see people. I do. I see people constantly abused by police, falsely charged. They're called contempt of cop charges, obstruction, or there are so many little charges that are so vague that they shouldn't even be on the list of things that they're like Class C misdemeanors. But what they are is enough to take you into the system. And so that's how they get away with even taking you to jail. In that instance in Virginia, they realized that, what are we going to charge him with? I don't know. We acted like asses. So let's just let him go and hopefully this disappears. But it didn't disappear for them. And that's
yeah,
partially because he was in a well-lit area.
he did
So
the right thing. And
he did the
obviously,
smart thing.
going to the military, you have money to be able, not like a lot, but you have a little bit of money. You got your military brothers who are like, dude, you need to get a lawyer. All of that was probably, he had a good structure. Now in Minnesota, I think it gets a little more complicated. He's a 20-year-old kid, but, and what essentially happened in this shooting, from what I understand, she was pulled over for, I think was it tags again?
Well, I've heard too, the mother said that he was pulled over for the stuff hanging from his rearview mirror.
I heard
And
that
then
too.
the official report said something like he had expired tags on his car.
One of the two, which is Jesus Christ, like both of those things, I've
We
been
haven't seen the
guilty of
body cam
myself.
footage yet, so we'll find out soon enough.
Actually, I have. It has been released.
So did they mention what they pulled him over
So
for when they approached the
I've
car?
owned, I haven't. It showed what I've seen is just them trying to handcuff him, and he is. There's no doubt, but he gets like back in. He like sits in his car, kind of, and then that's when she shoots him, and she tells him while he's sitting, like, I'm gonna tase you. I'm gonna tase you. And then she shoots him and she goes, oh my God, I shot him. Like,
Yeah,
it's obvious
I don't even understand how that happens either. That's a 19-year veteran confusing their taser with their service weapon.
right.
Wow.
I know, which, by the way, two different, like, for one, the weight, they weigh significantly different. I've played with both of them. Like I said, I have a friend
You
who's
could
a
give a
cop.
blind man, who's never held either or, and put one and other in his hand, and he would be able to tell you instantly. So it is unusual how she had the propensity to go for her gun regardless.
Yeah, no, exactly. And like, but and two, oh, the trigger. Again, I played with both, and and the taser is it's a quick little trigger, barely any resistance. As we're a gun, especially, an officer's handgun, a little bit more resistance. It, Also, you should probably have to mess with the safety. I don't know what her situation was. I wouldn't be
Yeah,
surprised. I mean,
you're looking at 3 or 4 pounds force that you would have to apply to a trigger like that.
Miss Barney Fife, I have no idea what she was doing, but Should have been in a different situation.
And
One
I'm going to
thing,
let you guys know out in public, women cops are even more dangerous. They live in a world where they have to compete with the man cop. And people also they don't have the physical appearance. They don't have the physical intimidation factor. And honestly, they do get some flack for it. I've seen many videos of
oh yeah, yeah.
women cops not able to handle their shit, basically because they're physically unable. And so that is going to give them, once again, the propensity to go for a weapon before they're going to go for any other
And
kind
I
of
think
restraint.
part of that is they have to make up for that, even if that's
Oh
not the
yeah.
situation. You know, like
and
if they come up to
and they
you,
end up having more attitude and less ability to de-escalate a situation than the man cops do, even
I
though
don't,
that's rare.
I don't know if that's completely true. I think it depends on who it is in
You need
situations.
to watch more YouTube.
Uh, I mean, like I said, like I know cops, which makes this difficult because most of the cops I know were actually really good, cool people, good individuals. But again, in this situation, you had somebody who just wasn't. Um, I don't know. Like, I really don't know if she did 19 years. I I don't buy. I don't buy that she was fearful of her life. I'm sorry. Like, it just doesn't. That doesn't pass the smell test for me.
Well,
Be it.
just go back to the daddy beats me every day because he's drunk thing. And
I mean,
not saying that that's a part of her history, but that's what you're looking at, though. People who aren't afraid of their life because of that situation, they are permanently in the mindset that I'm going to be killed at any moment. It's not the present situation. They are constantly going through that kind of thing. They don't evaluate each situation that differently. So
no,
that's
yeah.
why you know lots of situations where they beat up some 92-year-old lady because she doesn't want to comply with, like, get out of your car, and then they take her out and they tase her and smash her face on the ground. Was she really a threat in any? No, she wasn't. She didn't comply. Compliance is what makes them mad. Compliance is where they escalate. Compliance is where they feel betrayed. You have but hurt their feelings, and they're going to show you who's boss because you dared to say that you're not the boss of me, and they're going to show you they are.
I think, yeah, no, I think there's a lot there. And when you watch the video, because I'm not also saying that I'm not taking like a racial component to this. I'm not saying that she killed him because of his skin color. Um, because when she shot him, you could hear her. She immediate panic and fear in her voice, and honestly instant regret of like, oh my god, I did this.
Right.
So it's like she really screwed up, but it's like, what is going on in her brain,
Right.
and
She
why do
knew
we
that
have to?
situation wasn't that kind of situation.
Yes,
But
exactly.
that's why I'm saying that her mind was
Right,
already
right,
there,
exactly. I'm
even though the
just,
situation didn't permit it. So she knew. It's like it was an automatic response to kill and not to subdue.
no, exactly. And I mean, I think, and I was just like pretty much backing up your point there with that, but this excuse in general. Now we like compare. How do I put this? Okay, so the whole fear thing, and I'm scared and blah blah blah, and afraid for your life. But compare that with the first story. We talked about a lieutenant in the military, second lieutenant, again, overseas, terrorists, bullets flying at you kind of life, and you're afraid of the cops. And then the second story, we have to also subscribe to the fact that Dante Wright was probably terrified of that situation and scared of the cops, and quite a bit younger, less professional, I'm sure. Structured, put it that way, structured, because he wasn't in the military. So he doesn't even know how to act when he's panicked and scared like a military man would. And yeah, he resisted a little bit, but what do you do? Fight, the fight or flight that kicks in. Again, it's their job as cops to de-escalate. Yelling at them, pointing weapons at someone does not de-escalate that situation. I I'm not going to sit here and say, oh, you should resist. No, you shouldn't. You definitely shouldn't resist, but at no point is the resisting arrest should result in your death. I mean, you can look at what resisting arrest actually does add up to as far as like um, a penalty, and I believe it can hold as minimal as like 7 days in jail. Like that should be
But
up
every
to.
time that people do some kind of resisting arrest, whether it be just like complete like pacify resisting arrest, like get up, we're going to put handcuffs on you and you go limp, to if you even struggle or move a little bit, I guarantee you you're going to have assault on a police officer. He kicked
Oh,
my shin,
100%. No, I'm not debating that
which
at
is
all.
a high end felony.
But
So
what I
that
am saying though,
they're not afraid to put that on you.
right? What I am like trying to paint here though is the whole fear, because that's what seems to be relevant in both cases. The second one though, we're more concerned about the cop, the the fear for your life, and that's why you got to draw a weapon. And the reason why I don't buy that, or maybe I'll say this: if you're a cop and you fear for your life, you're kind of a pussy. I'm sorry, like I just said it. If you're a cop and you're pissed off at me, I'll eat my ass. Because, and I bring this up because as this is a 2018 study that found that being a cop isn't even in the top 10 most dangerous jobs in this country.
No, no, it's
Not
not.
even top 10, not even the top 15. It falls at number 16. And let me just read a little bit of the data here for you. So, if you are a cop or a sheriff's patrol officer, about you have out of 100,000 officers, about 14 to 15 will die. I mean, that's numbers are it's jarring. Like that's quite a bit. If you're
And a lot of cops die from auto
hold on,
accidents that they caused themselves.
all right, I'm gonna keep going here though. Construction labor, 15 to 16 out of 100,000 will die. Um, First line supervisors of mechanics, installers, and repairs. I don't even know what the hell that is, but 16 out of 100,000 will die. Ground maintenance workers, dudes who like cut lawn and stuff, 18 out of 100,000 will die. Miscellaneous agriculture workers, 18 out of 100,000 will die. I'm going to skip a few because farmers, ranchers, and agricultural managers, 23 out of 100,000 will die. If you're just a driver, a truck driver, transportation, you bring shit from point A to point B, 26 out of 100,000 will die. Like, think about that. Cops, we were at 14 out of 100,000. You're a driver, 26 out of 100,000. By the way, we're just in the top. Like, we're not even in the top five. Like, I'm gonna skip to. I'll go to the top. Let's play a quick game. Okay, I'm gonna go top five. What do you think they are? Starting with five.
It's going to be like Alaskan shipboat captain.
Well, we're going at five. What's five? You think?
What's five? Well, I was going for one, but five is probably like line worker for the electric company.
And that's actually in the top 10, but not top five. Top five is actually refuse and recyclable material collectors. 34 out of 100,000 will die. What do you got for number four?
Hair dryer testers.
Roofers, which is a job I used to do.
Yep, I've done a few roofs. You can fall off a roof and die real quick.
And I've actually fallen off a roof, by the way. Many of you probably wishing I was one of the 49 out of 100,000 people that will die every year from roofing. Number three, which is one I kind of caught me by surprise, aircraft pilots and flight engineers. Because I mean,
Hmm.
we're told that planes are pretty safe, but at 56 out of 100,000,
It probably is not including the pilots for commercial airlines. We're talking about small aircraft pilots.
that's probably true too. Okay, so number two, what are you going with?
Shark wrangler.
Shark Wrangler. Kind of, yes. I mean, like I'm gonna give it to you. I think that's fair. Fishers and related fishing workers, 86 out of 100,000 people. And number one, can you guess what it is? The most dangerous job, which, by the way, if you want to throw this in percentages, is over 350% more dangerous than being a cop.
Well, if it can relate to cardiovascular problems, I'd probably say cake decorator.
So you got nothing. No idea?
Okay. No,
No?
go ahead.
I'm giving you a shot here. Anything?
No, 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 just hit it. I'm too interested.
Logging workers. Yeah, you cut down trees and shit. And that would be 136 out of 100,000. So again, we went 136 out of 100,000 for the most dangerous job to cops, which is about 15 out of 100,000.
So, Zach, why are we not talking about the death epidemic in loggers? Huh? It's an
I'm
epidemic
just saying,
of logging deaths.
I'm just saying, if you're a logger and you're like, dude, I was fearful of my life, I believe you. You have a good. If you're a cop and you're like, hey, I got a Batman utility with all sorts of crap on here, and I'm fearful of my life, I said, but like, uh, you're a pussy. Toughen up, Buttercup. Like, I don't know what your problem is. I really don't. You should be fine. You know. Uh, but I don't know. I think one thing I will say is someone who's a representative, if you will. I don't speak for the left, but someone who is a left-leaning person. I do think this situation in Minnesota with Dante Wright, um, I don't think it warrants the looting and the riots and all of that. I mean, I remember, I'm sure you remember this too, Scott, like back in the Rodney King era of police brutality. And I mean, that's like the earliest that I think you and I can really remember because before then we were
Before
like
public video,
babies.
like it was so lucky that was caught on video. It was almost it was a fluke.
Right, right. But and also prior to that, you and I were too young to give a shit. So, it's like one of those first things you see when you're watching the news. You kind of remember. I think a lot of people have like the JFK thing, the moon, whatever. That was one of those things I remember being at like a really young age and seeing that. And like the riots and the protests that stemmed from that, and yes, even the riots and protests that stemmed from George Floyd, it was because they weren't listening. Because nothing else was working. Like, what's the old saying? You resort to violence when it's your last option. And, like, I'm on the side of the people who protest police pretty much exclusively. I'm on the left side of all of it, but understand you have a voice now. And it actually only makes you look bad when you're looting and rioting when you do have that platform that you can use. And right now, it's the time to transform that protest machine. And by the way, continue protesting, 100%, but transform that anger into something that conveys a message, into policy, into change. Violence in looting, rioting, all that, it's not gonna fix anything. In fact, you're going to lose sympathizers. And it's not the answer because everybody's listening. Everybody wants to do something about this, I think. Yeah, there's going to be your people on the right who are still going to be, "Poof, I like licking cops' boots. But for the most part, even the police, I mean, even the captain in this situation is the one who released the body cam footage right out the gate. And he was like, I think it's fair to do this not only for the community, but for Dante Wright to see what happened. That's unheard of. That's unprecedented. In
Well, and you got to admit, it also humanized her a little bit because of right after she shot him, she knew exactly that she had screwed up big time.
yes,
So
yeah.
it helps her in a little way too.
No, you're 100% right. Because yeah, looking at that, look, I think she's incompetent. I don't think she should be a police officer, but I don't think she's a monster. I don't think, I don't put her at the same level I put like Derek Chauvin as being like, just a complete dickbag. I think you're right. And that transparency is one of those things that a lot of us have been protesting and fighting for years, and we do have that now. So I do think, maybe I don't know. I think the looting and rioting. Uh, I don't think we need to do that anymore. I know it sounds. I don't know. I don't know what take. Scott,
Yeah,
what do you
you
got?
can't even if you're. Of course, I would always support the protesting, but you cannot it even doesn't matter what media side you're on. You cannot disassociate the protesting here and looting and rioting 2 streets over. It doesn't matter if they're the same group of people or they're not associated. Everybody's going to look at it as a whole, like as a single event. So when it happens, you can't distance yourself from it, because it's kind of an enabling thing. If and because if it's so big, then the cops can't stop the looting or rioting, and then the whole message gets completely muddied.
Yeah, well, like during the summer, the protests that were happening, the Black Lives Matter members and many of the community members were actually like openly fighting with members, some, not all, but some like destructive members of Antifa and other just douchebags who were
That is
causing
true.
problems.
I will verify that, even as
You know,
they were trying to kick out the Antifa people because they were openly trying to incite anarchy
mhm.
and
And,
breaking windows, trying to start things.
and in comparison to this as well, like the fact that I think I don't know. I just maybe people just didn't hear because I knew that really early on, and I've just recently heard that the communities and Black Lives Matter and all those people were, I don't know, were standing up to the saboteurs, if you want to call them. But that same thing, it does bear that responsibility of having to say, hey, no, we're not part of these guys. We don't condone this. I mean, it's the same as the Trumpers in the January 6th. Like, what, 30% of the people who attacked the Capitol on January 6th didn't even support Trump? Like,
Yeah,
you know,
and there
but
were a couple busted Antifa people there as well, doing the same thing.
but you had
It wanted to just sow chaos. That's
but,
what they were there to do. They don't give a shit about the political nature of the situation.
but you had, you know, pretty much every Trump supporter who backed that whole thing, and you're like, you shouldn't have, because that makes you look bad, you know. But they fell into that that trap of, and by the way, so many, um, so many House Democrats fell into that trap over the summer of saying, "Oh, let's just overlook the looting and rioting," and that's why they lost their seat. That's why they almost lost the House here in 2020. You know, but it happens. This is something you have to just because it looks bad for your side, you have to still acknowledge it's there, and you know, and distance your group from that kind of behavior.
And I honestly, I don't know how they can do that. I mean, it's we know that um, you know, a lot of those things are going to cross platform, even if they try their hardest not to do that, just because there are so many people just looking, of every race, just looking to do those other things, to riot and burn, and just to go, and have Jake Paul out in the middle of the stuff going, check it out, I stole a pair of socks, woohoo. So it's almost like a party for some people, and that means
It
that
is.
they don't really care. They're not there for the message. They're there to basically party and loot and do shit on the behalf of entertainment.
I think, in that regard too, I think some of that responsibility also comes down to us. You know, um, Fox News is in Newsmax and OAN. I guarantee you, pretty much the only thing that they're going to talk about during most of the situation with Dante Wright and the police shooting, their main focus is going to be the looting and rioting. And, January 6th, it was all, look what Trump did, look what Trump did, on CNN, MSNBC, and places like that. I think it becomes on us as the person who takes in this information to say, okay, look, these people have an angle, these people have an angle. I'm going to filter that information through two channels. One thing that's interesting, you and I were talking, I think, over text about like newsmen, and we were talking about how we both have this just giant distaste for Chuck Todd. And I told you, I said, I think if I'm going to give someone like news anchor guy person, like a 5-star, like this is who I go to, is actually Sagar and Jetty, who is
Yeah, I
a
love them.
right
Love them.
wing. He's a right wing populist. And why is he my favorite? because he doesn't agree with me on everything. And I actually, I think that's something everyone should do is you should subscribe to people who do not agree with you. That whole like bubble thinking is a problem in our country. And I used to be one of those guys. I was one of those like ban guns, like neoliberal Hillary Clinton D-bags just like 4 years ago. Like, and it wasn't until I started listening to other people who I didn't exactly agree with was I able to see this different view. And I know there's a ton of people who are listening who are like, yeah, well, you know, good thing you're not that anymore. Guess what? You are one, okay? Like, I hate to be that way, but you are if you don't take in a lot of different views and don't become complacent and don't assume that your ideology is perfect because it's not.
Yeah, and don't assume the people you think are your heroes are actually on your side. That's the biggest lie ever.
That's another huge one. Yeah, I mean, again, like someone like for me, Sagar and Jetty is perfect. Where on a lot of economic things, we lie pretty close because we're both populists. But he's from the right wing, and he does do a show, Rising, with Crystal Ball, who I think on the social, pretty much Crystal and I are very much aligned. But that's why I listen to Sagar more because I'm like, he's gonna tell me truth I hear. And
Right, and I like it for the exact same reason on the, you know, Jenny or Crystal is. Why don't I want to say Jenny? Is that some
Jetty,
other show he does?
I think well, yeah, they have a few people that but yeah,
Well, whenever she, she's a good balance for him, and they commonly may hold different opinions about this or that. You can, but their attitudes are not of my opposition. Sometimes it's also my compadre, and we're also in agreement at the same time. You're always going to find people who are so polarized that it's never going to happen. You're never going to pull them, but you need to befriend people who are not so polarized, that have an more open view about things. And you may find certain topics and you become much more powerful of absorbing knowledge and truth. And when you do that, and you just stay in one place, and that's what scares me about a lot of places, even of higher education, is that they tend to shun people who have different ideas.
oh my god,
And
yes.
that's so weird, because even my college, I took some extremely liberal courses where I was reading like third wave feminist books, and they were honors humanity courses. I had my professor looked like Santa Claus with a ponytail and a joint in his hand. And I showed up for his second class, and it blew his mind, because he gave me so much shit for basically saying, well, what about this, and offering different opinions. We studied the Sufis. It was one of those courses, but I wasn't afraid of the material. I wasn't afraid of the teacher, even though he was an ass the first time around. He gave me nothing but respect when I showed up for his second class. And I mean, like, the next honors class. I didn't even have to take it. And that showed me that although he was being a little aggressive with giving these younger students a more liberal view, he realized that if you can continue to challenge me, I'll digest it. I'll see what truths I can pick out of it, and we'll find a place in the middle to compromise.
And I think that's the way it needs to be. But yeah, you are right. Like we've gotten to a point, and that's really what scares me in these kind of situations, like we were talking about tonight. With Nazario and Wright, it, everything has to be so polarized. And I hate to say this, but if you voted for Trump or you're a right winger, I can almost pretty much guarantee you're going to disagree with everything we said, and you're going to be on the cop side. It,
I don't think so. I honestly think those people who, just because you voted for Trump or you're a right winger, doesn't necessarily mean that. I think when people are honest with themselves and put themselves in the position of one of those people, that the truth was a whole nother story. And if people are honest with it, and that works for the left too, thinking that somebody, say, who protected themselves with a gun wasn't out to shoot protesters. It's, you have to see the reality of the situation and put yourself there. And when you do that, people who had one polarized opinion or another may quickly change their opinion, because they realize that's a human response, and what this person did was not appropriate.
Let
You know
me
what I mean?
I know what you're saying. I just think you're giving a lot of credit to people.
I,
like in
I,
gen like and
I
in
give hope in a
general.
lot of people. I'll
And,
give up on those kind of people quickly too if there's
and
you get no.
I'm not giving up to um, I'm just saying like that's where so many people start. I know this because I was them. I deal with it on the left all the time. A lot of my Democrat friends, it can be challenging to talk to them because they're the same thing. Like I can watch MSNBC, I can see CNN or whatever, and I know exactly their talking points. I know exactly how they're gonna feel about something, and it's the same thing, with the right, and it's almost like, and maybe to be fair, I shouldn't say if your ideology is based on the left or the right. I should say if you subscribe to, you know, the Young Turks, or if you subscribe to Crowder, or if you whatever, I can figure out your thought. Then, if you're a Tucker Carlson fan, I know exactly how you're gonna feel. If you're a Rachel Maddow fan, you're gonna wish that there was more gay, lesbian, black women looting white-owned businesses. I know exactly where you're coming from
Yeah, it
because of
makes
that.
them happy when it fits some kind of preconceived profile, and then it makes them quiet when it doesn't. And the same thing goes for the right. They'd rather, and the reality of the situation is it's not always that way.
I think, quickly before we gotta head out, because I actually have a recording with my band tonight. But one thing that kind of brings that up, um, just that point of like, let's run with a narrative until we can't, has also been the shootings that we've had since we've opened up further here in America in 2021. There was, okay, so what was it, last Friday? There was somebody who drove into the Capitol building, or not really even into the building. They drove into a barrier,
It was a barrier to the deal, and he ran over a police
and he
officer.
did kill a police officer. And I remember, oh, dude, MSNBC. One of the first things, and someone I work with, one of my employees, she is very. She comes in, did you see what those Trumpers are doing again? And she's going off on this whole thing. I came home after, and I was watching a little bit of it, and it was like they were going all in on, oh, this is another Trump terrorist, blah, blah, blah. Then the name gets released, and they just shut up. And it was like it never happened. They just stopped talking about it
Yeah,
because
it
he
ended
was
up
like,
being a Farrakhan black nationalist, and Farrakhan's people are absolute racists. Farrakhan is an open racist.
yeah, if you've ever lived in New York, you know that. They're the ones that yell at you on the corner.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I mean that's no, but the same aspect with that story though is like Fox was acting like that story didn't happen. By Saturday, it was like the big thing they were running with. Do you see what the
Well, and the Walmart shooting or the grocery store shooting, they reported him as a white man, and he ended up being of Middle Eastern descent, and it was like, oh, okay,
yes.
and yeah, so it was all of those things people prejudge in just about every one of these shootings we've had recently has been one of just about or one of everybody. So
We
I don't
got
know what you guys.
diversity in our mass shooters. This is
We
America.
do, we
That's what we
do,
do.
absolutely. Everybody wants to kill everybody.
We shoot a lot of people and we're diverse. But I think no, I think the thing that bothers me about that is that for me that just shows how polarized we are, and that kind of paints a picture of well, we don't care about these tragedies. We don't care about the people who got shot and killed in that grocery store if it wasn't done by a white guy. Or we don't care about it if it wasn't done by a black guy or a Muslim or whatever. Like, can we just stop and go, holy crap, people died. This was a tragedy. Can we just, like, do we have to give up on stories because we don't have a narrative tied with it? But it almost feels like that's the way it is. And I know that's not like a super new thing, but do I remember a time, wasn't that long ago, in fact, I want to say it was probably Obama's administration, where you really couldn't tell that the news was that polarized. And I'm going early administration, by the way, 2010, around that era. Like, yeah, they leaned one way or the other, and you could kind of But now they're just outright like in your no. We are
Yeah. When it was
left
hands up,
leaning.
don't shoot at the end of Obama's administration, things had definitely become racially polarized.
I wouldn't even say. I would say like not racially as much as I would say ideologically. Left, right. Oh,
Right.
this is right wing news. This is or conservative news. This is liberal news. I don't know. I think that I think I said this last time. I think that is going to be the death of our country. If we can't fix that, we can't come together. I don't know. I really I don't know. I fear for what is going to happen in 10 or 15 years. After China's GDP is ahead of ours, we're no longer the strongest economy. We are losing ground in every aspect of what is considered a successful country. And the big thing you talked about, um, pride in your country and how important that is. But the fucked up thing is, in this country, our biggest enemy is our neighbor. Like, we talked about that poll here a couple months ago that people on the left like say they're the biggest threat to our country is conservatives and right wingers and vice
Or,
versa. Right wingers said the same
or
thing
my
about.
favorite example is the woman who her right wing next door neighbor, who at the time had a Trump flag out, had been mowing her lawn just to be a good neighbor, and she wanted him to stop because he was a Trumper.
Yeah, yeah. No,
Like
and
what? He wasn't doing it to convert you. He was doing it to be friendly.
and the thing is yeah, I think I'm this is off the top of my head, so I don't think I'm right on this, but I do know that conservatives by percentile think liberals are their biggest threat more than vice versa. But it's the same way. They both fall in at number one at threat to this country. If you're a conservative, you feel like the number one threat is liberals, and if you're a liberal, you feel like the number one threat is conservatives. And it's all because of the news we consume. Like it all comes down to that. No matter if it's YouTube or wherever. Very rarely do you have just like, however you want to play this guy, I don't care, but very rarely do you have just a Joe Rogan who, yeah, he talks about crap, he's kind of stoned, he really, but he doesn't have a narrative. I think because he's just too whatever,
Yeah,
and
I mean Joe is that kind of a hippie. I mean, and he's all over the place with a lot of his opinions, and that's okay because he's lived in Hollywood. He's done all that. He's hit Joe. The core of Joe has survived. All the onslaught of the things that we would consider to be ultra left and ultra right. He's still Joe.
exactly, yeah, and there again, like we talked about before, Rising. I don't know if there's anything else in news related that is like Rising. Um,
No, I don't know of anything.
you know, because yeah, it's perfect. You got left and right, and they do it the right way, But anyway, Scott, do you have anything more to add before we end this?
Nope, I would just tell everybody to watch the facts as they come out and try not to be swayed by one media or another. And hopefully we can I don't know what it's going to take before, nationally we have to do some kind of referendum on not only training but police behavior and maybe have a stricter rules, tighter guidelines, better screening, maybe even pay them more, but pay the ones more who are thoroughly vetted to be our quote watchers.
Too, quantitative um, anonymity is something we really do need to get rid of.
Oh, you
It,
mean immunity?
immunity, yeah, sorry. Um, Sorry, I was looking at like two different things here. But yeah, no, like that's another thing we really have to get rid of because it's just like, hey, here's your get out of jail free card. Like that's basically letting Matt Gates out at like a child care center. Like you don't know, like
Yeah, yeah. The thing is, and that was also implemented by the courts. It was never anything that was voted on or anything else. So qualified immunity has
qualified immunity. Yes, thank you.
it just got you almost there. That's
God,
why it got thrown out. I think in New York and maybe even in DC. There's a few states that have now said no longer will we subscribe to qualified immunity because it completely removes the responsibility and the accountability of the police officers to do heinous things and then just claim, well, it was in the heat of the moment. You can't punish me because no, we need to remove that. And if that means giving them more money to be more responsible, better trained, actually know the law, follow the Constitution, and make sure everybody's rights are protected, instead of pulling out a gun and randomly shooting people until they feel like they're safe again.
Yeah, no, I think too, couple that with banning the whole gypsy cop thing.
Yeah.
I think you fix a lot of the problems. I really do. Like if they know
And
that.
pulling off that blue line, the thin blue line flag off of all those cars, that's literally a desecration of the American flag. I want to be able to burn it, and I want to be able to keep it flying above everything, but I don't want a bastardization of the flag stuck on the back of the police car next to the blue Punisher skull.
Yes, I know. Yeah. No, you're right about that. No, would you open up the whole thing like the police mentality, which that's got to be redone. Although I don't, yeah, I don't know. It's hard to be like, hey, I'm a superhero, but I'm a big fucking pussy and I'm scared of every situation. Like, come on, man, you got to pick one side of it. Either you're Superman or you're, Scott in, a nursing home. Like, which one are you?
Yeah, it's a big problem that we're going to have to tackle in the future, and that's just one on the stack. But
No,
maybe we
exactly.
can we collectively come together and offer them something, because the only thing else we have to offer in return is violence begets violence.
Yeah, and that's where we get with the looting and rioting, and that's what I'm saying. I think we are getting to a point where we're above that now. I really do. I think that our voices are at least being heard. But anyway, yeah, thanks a lot for tuning in, guys. We will be back to do a regular show probably if well, you won't get it till probably Friday or Saturday. So anyway, thanks a lot, guys. Take care.
Take care.